Most public agencies aren't exposed because they don't care about accessibility. They're exposed because accessibility risk hides in places no one owns. Title II risk rarely comes from one dramatic failure. It comes from accumulated blind spots. That's where the danger lies. Class is in session. This is Hounder University. I'm your professor, Hayden Malio, and today we're mapping exactly where public agencies are most exposed and why it's usually not where they're looking. Exposure area number 1, forms and transactional workflows. Think about what public agencies actually do. They process transactions, they permit applications, business license, tax payments, utility services, public record requests, right? Inspection scheduling, event registrations, all these massive things. These aren't static content pages. They're interactive systems, and interactive systems are where accessibility issues become barriers, common risk patterns. So some common risk patterns we see in these forms are unlabeled form fields, missing programmatic labels for screen readers, error messages that rely only on color, required fields not announced properly, and CAPTCHA systems without accessible alternatives, date pickers that can't be navigated by a keyboard, dynamic content updates not announced to assistive technology. And here's why this matters. When a resident can't complete a permit application because of an inaccessible form, that's really not a minor UX flaw. That's a denial of access. In enforcement contexts, transactional workflows get heightened scrutiny because they represent core public functions. Agencies fix homepage contrast and leave the application system completely broken. That's just a misaligned prioritization. Now, exposure area number 2, PDFs and public docs. For many agencies, documents are the real accessibility battleground. Board agendas, meeting minutes, public reports, policy manuals, budget documents, and permit forms. Many of these are scanned images without any OCR, invisible to screen readers, structurally untagged. They're missing heading hierarchy, charts without text alternatives. There's no reading order defined. They're missing accessible form fields. And the scale problem is real. Agency may host thousands of legacy PDFs, and one inaccessible document upload per week becomes 50 by the end of the year. So when complaints come in, document accessibility is frequently cited because documents often carry critical information, public notices, regulatory requirements, procedural instructions. So a defensible approach is to inventory everything, classify by the risk, active service documents, regulatory materials, or archival content. Prioritize and remediate high impact documents first. Set standards for every new document uploaded going forward, because without governance, document risk grows every single week. Exposure area number 3, third-party vendors and embedded tools. Most agencies rely on external vendors for some of their most important public-facing systems: payment processing, licensing platforms, event scheduling, GIS mapping, data dashboards and chat tools. And the most common misconception in this category is if the vendor built it, the vendor is responsible. Well, no. Under ADA Title II, public entities remain accountable for the accessibility of the service delivered to the public. That means vendor contracts may include accessibility language that does not eliminate your exposure. Common vendor-related failure patterns include things like embedded iframes without accessible labeling, third-party portals with inconsistent keyboard support, maps that require precise mouse control, payment systems that fail in screen reader testing, and external login systems without a proper error message. The risk management here kind of requires accessibility review during procurement before you sign, accessibility clauses in every contract, ongoing testing of vendor updates, clear ownership when issues are identified, and accessibility governance, must extend beyond your CMS. Exposure area number 4, decentralized publishing and content drift. Public agencies don't have one person managing their website. Departments manage their own sections. Editors rotate. Temporary staff upload documents. Seasonal updates happen fast. Without governance, accessibility drifts, and it drifts quietly, whispers. Common operational drift oftentimes includes things like improper heading structures, published by well-meaning editors, images uploaded without alt text, tables used for layout instead of data, inconsistent link tags, not accessible PDFs added kind of after internal audit, event pages with inaccessible registration widgets. I don't think these are malicious, it's just structural. And so accessibility requires editor training, accessible content guidelines, pre-published review processes, template level controls, recurring monitoring. Without oversight, compliance regresses, and drift creates cumulative exposure that compounds over time. Fifth exposure area, accessibility overlays. This one needs to be said directly. Overlays are frequently marketed as compliance solutions. They're not. They can provide adjustable contrast, text resizing, and some automated fixes. What they cannot provide, structural document remediation, accessible transactional logic, vendor workflow corrections, governance documentation, risk-based prioritization. In enforcement or complaint scenarios, overlays do not replace a baseline audit. Remediation history, a monitoring program, documentation. Overlays may reduce visible issues. They do not create a defensible compliance infrastructure. Agencies that rely solely on overlays often believe they've solved the problem, but they haven't. Exposure area number 6. Documentation gaps. This is the least visible risk and often the most consequential. An agency might be actively fixing an issue, but if it cannot demonstrate when the audit was conducted, how issues were prioritized, which issues were resolved, what timeline exists for the remaining items, who owns the program, how monitoring occurs, it lacks defensibility. In review scenarios, documentation becomes central. Good faith compliance is not a statement, it is a paper trail. Defensible programs include things like a remediation log with timestamps, risk-based prioritization frameworks, ongoing scan history, manual QA notes, complaint response procedures, executive reporting summaries. Without documentation, even meaningful work can look disorganized to a reviewer. Here's the underlying pattern of all these. Accessibility risks rarely arise as a single catastrophic issue. It compounds. Each new document, each vendor update, each template modification, each staff change. Small gaps accumulate into a structural exposure. And agencies that manage reactively end up in a cycle of emergency remediation, legal review, internal scrambling, and maybe public scrutiny. Governance breaks that cycle. Reducing ADA Title II risk doesn't require a bunch of panic. It just requires structure, baseline audit, risk classification, prioritized remediation roadmap, dedicated remediation capacity, monitoring cadence, document reporting, vendor review process, clear internal ownership. I know this all sounds like a lot, but it is what you need to make sure that you're defensible if someone comes knocking. This is Hounder University, where public agencies are most exposed under ADA Title II. Your attendance has been noted. If this was useful, share it with whoever owns your payment portal and quietly hoping it's fine. Class is dismissed.